Hello, I'm male feminist Anders Bloom, and because all lives matter here at Thorin's channel, I give you a big welcome.
Right, this is going to be episode 66 of Counterpoints. As I have referenced in the past, but continue to ignore, all the best advice in life, Moses, is advice that you give to other people, because the secret is when you look at someone else's life, you can just be very objective, obviously, and you can see all the flaws and all the holes where they could make things more efficient, and do a better job. And you tell them, hey, if you just fix this small thing, it'll be way better. So in similar fashion, on every one of these two-man episodes, I always start like, it's all right, guys. It's all right. We haven't got a guest after all. Did start as a two-man show, but maybe we'll do more of these things. And then any week where I can't get a guest, I'm like, yeah, it's cancelled this week. Yeah, I can't. No, I can't do one this week. Like, I don't know why, because it if you actually do two-man episodes, it's obviously so easy to coordinate, isn't it? You just need one other person to be available when you are. So we have starved them a little bit for these.
And we're not players. We're not just going to forget that we scheduled anything.
Exactly.
So it makes everything much easier.
Oh, if people just knew how many times players will flake on you, it is nuts, isn't it? Like, that's one of the actual reasons also why for shows it is. I started to make it so that, like, by default, you try not to have one guest, you have two. Just because it makes it less likely you get zero guests appearing to the show.
Putting some fucking NASA level redundancy in your
exactly. No. Well, the only way that would be better is if I had some like United Air style thing where I actually ended up with three people and one guy just gets thrown out of the podcast like 10 minutes in. Like, so obviously the joke would be it'd have to be some low level player, wouldn't it be? So the joke, let's just pick someone random. I don't know, like Fogley or something's in the episode, and then all of a sudden it's like, sorry, Fogley, I'm just going to have to break in here and remove you from the call. I'm afraid that, I'll just make the joke completely. Tarek was available, so see you, mate. Anyway, thanks for the episode. Then all of a sudden just drag the new box in, like, yeah, anyway, so Tarek, welcome to the show, mate. The real second guest, unfortunately we overbooked this episode.
The one we really wanted has actually arrived. We didn't expect that, so see you later.
See, the sad thing is that reminds me of a particular story that you know about a certain member of the casting crew who was in an extracurricular activity and decided to actually change who he was with at the time in similar fashion that I can't in any way tell on this episode. But
oh no, that was
like
so
the same,
funny.
It's the same mentality that also just cringes me, because the idea that you're just going to tell someone like, actually, I would like to do better than what I'm doing right now. Can I change?
You were my first pick until this other person came into the room. Therefore, see you later.
Right. On that note, so the good thing is, actually, I've noticed there are a lot of topics where it's one of the problems with these shows I actually struggle with is the best shows for sure are the ones where you make a topic around who you have on the show. So, for example, if you remember the one we had where we had like Carrigan and Glaive, that was obviously fucking fire, because like the concept we had was sick. They were the best guests to talk about it. We could have distract, but the problem with that is it's really hard to do an episode like that on a weekly basis, or even that often. Like sometimes even when you have the initial topic, it just doesn't go where you thought it was going to, so it doesn't get as sick as you thought it would. So when it's not those episodes, I think generally you just make them topical. So I've got a bunch of topics here that definitely are ones that people are thinking about. So the first one is initially going to sound boring, but hear us out on this one. So when I say Vertigo is in the map pool now, people are going to go, oh, come on, man, that's like an ages-old topic. That came out like, a fucking month ago. Everyone's played it. But the point is, we've only just had the first tournaments that were featuring it. Like, it was at the DreamHack Rio I saw. It's now being played in some of the other LAN tournaments. And obviously, the last tournaments at that point in time when it came out as a map didn't initially use it. Like, Star Series still had cash in the pool. So actually, first question, before we get into Vertigo, the map itself, what do you think about cash being replaced as the map that like makes space for it? Like, do you think that's the right one?
Yeah, but not on like any kind of like issue with the map itself or like tactical problem or anything like that. I think if you were gonna replace a map, for the way it plays, it would be something like Mirage. I just think cash is a map that not a teams want to play. Like not a lot of teams are really selecting cash. It doesn't seem to be very popular with teams. And I mean, that's been pretty well known. We've had a lot of people, a lot of players and a lot of in-game leaders especially come in here and just be like, we don't know how to figure out the CT side. So it is a little weird in that sense, although we have seen it getting played a little bit more recently, but still, just in terms of popularity and like comfort, like it's never a map that people are picking. It's usually one of the leftovers. So, I mean, it makes sense from that front. Obviously, Mirage as a map would be, I think, the other candidate where it feels like everything's kind of been figured out. Like there hasn't been a whole lot of new ideas, new refreshed strategies brought into the map where it's been played out. I know a lot of people are expressing frustration with Mirage recently as well. But I mean, I can't be too upset, especially when you consider, I mean, what's FM Pones made it well known for a while that it's going to be completely updated and revamped. So why not just take it out for the moment and see what the revamps are like? I think it's a pretty easy and safe selection from Valve, right? Because they can always say if Vertigo doesn't work out, if everyone's hating on Vertigo, Cash gets reskinned and you know, a couple things change, and they just bring it right back in. I mean, they said it was something where Vertigo's coming in while just for some time to see how it plays while Cash is getting fixed. So they still have that to fall back on. So I can understand from Valve, that's a pretty safe way to introduce a new map.
Yeah. I definitely agree, by the way, on that exactly that reason. Like, here's the thing. If you looked at the map pool, I mean, ignoring that I've just never liked this version of Nuke, I still don't particularly like it now. To be fair, at least, obviously, it has like a cool element that at least Astralis has that record on it. So that kind of gives it some spice. But I still don't think it's a very good map. But bearing in mind, that wasn't introduced that long ago, and so it's still unlikely they're going to remove it again. Of the maps that are available, there's not that many choices left to remove. So I kind of agree with you. I don't think there's anything actually explicitly wrong with Cash. I still think it's a good map. Yeah. But I do think that, yeah, if you look at the scene, people forget this. Yes, Nuke was a map that wasn't played much, but actually Nuke and Cash were similar levels of being like the two that were clearly not being played. Like, yeah, there'll be some teams that ban Overpass, but the difference is then everyone else plays Overpass. Similarly, if someone bans Mirage, everyone else plays Mirage. But the difference was, like, the key for me is it not only do people ban these maps, but think how few teams can reliably pick Cash. Like, that's a warning sign to me, because it's actually, I know everyone's always paired the two maps as being like the DM maps. For me, it reminds me of the thing with Dust 2, where it's like, even if you're really good at Dust 2, unless the other guy's really bad, you're probably not picking it. You're probably letting it come up as like a third map or a best of one map or something. It's not a map you want to pick, because the problem is, I feel like this, like as a general rule, I would say as a fan, think about it this way. If people are good on a map, but they won't pick it except in a scenario where it's like a pure punish, that probably suggests even the best teams don't think you can reliably win on it, or you never feel like that comfortable. Like you're saying on Cash, people don't quite feel like you can like nail the CT side down. They don't feel like you can guarantee what's going to work. Similarly, you look at Dust 2, there's a lot of really good teams that have lost on that map. If you look, like there's still a lot of variance. So that's actually not even a bad reason. If Valve wanted to have like a rationale as to how they remove the maps, I know people's old theory was they just removed the maps that hadn't yet been reworked, because that looked like what they were doing if you looked at it. Yeah. But obviously they have skipped that now with Mirage, because that would have made Mirage logically the next map to get removed. But I don't think actually as a criteria, using what you said as a real thing, if they looked up the map stats and saw no one in competitive ever plays this map anyway, that's a pretty good reason to potentially highlight that one to be removed. I don't know if Valve really cares about that, but I would like that as a good reason why.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like the dream, right? To think that Valve is looking at the competitive scene. I don't think they are. I think, if anything, they would use statistics from matchmaking, as they've done with most of their decisions. And I honestly more lean towards the idea that they found a way where they could introduce a map that's going to be so vastly different from anything we've seen. And use like the Cash remake as like an excuse to make it like a trial run, right? Because they can reverse that at any time if they want, for good reason. Yes. I think the one unfortunate part about Cash being taken out is it did feel like a unique map in the sense that I think it's the only map we have, I'm trying to think, that actually skews T-sided, where T's win the more rounds and a half. I think it was super close. It was something like 8-7 or 9-6 was like the ending skew when it got taken out, at least in the professional levels. So, I mean, that's pretty unique in and of itself. You know, a lot of people have those conversations about should a map be 8-7 and a half? Does it matter if, you know, it's 12-3 dominant CT side? I mean, this was an offensive map. Partially because no one could figure out the CT side. And I mean, I think that was a very cool feature where it put like the onus of action and the onus of aggression on the CT side to be the ones to find information and be a little bit more aggressive than we're used to seeing. So I thought it played pretty cool, but yeah, there's plenty of reasons why teams never felt comfortable on it and why it just stopped getting picked overall in the scene.
What about the actual Vertigo map specifically that's replacing it? So, like, I assume you've played it. I mean, It's only been seen in a couple of matches so far. What do you think of this map in the context of like putting it in the competitive pool?
I haven't seen too many. I haven't seen any of the matches that it's been played in, but I know when I was home for about like 10 days before coming to Pro League, I scrimmed it a pretty healthy amount for that week. I think it's just kind of interesting. It's so different. Like, I feel like the fights and the battles and the timings that you get into on this map are very different from any other map, especially like the style of fights you have, because there's so many angles once you get into the bomb sites. I think it feels like it's going to be really CT-sided to me, just because it's like you can hear everything terrorists are doing on the map, because it's like 2 levels and it's not just the bomb site. It's like the whole map is 2 levels. You can hear terrorist footsteps if they want to like try and run over to the B bomb site or to the A bomb site or switch things up. They have to be like very cautious. So in the mid rounds, you either hear the footsteps or you get a lot of time where there's just like nothing happening on the map. So I think once utility usage like gets better and better and a few more tricks get figured out, this feels like it's going to be CT sided, especially because it looks like I think it's the A bomb site is going to be played pretty much entirely retake, and then you'll just stack mid and towards the B bomb site. So you'll be able to shut down any fast hits towards the B site, and then, you know, retake the A bomb site, which can be pretty tough for terrorists to get into solid positions, especially once teams nail down like a utility sequence for the retakes. But overall, I think it's a cool map. It has some ideas for some very quick flanks with the drop down the elevator shaft, with, you know, the run down either of the stairs, whether it's from mid or the B bomb site. So there's some cool things that I think will make it interesting to see it play out. But I think it feels like it's going to be very CT sided. It feels like mid is going to be a lot of where terrorists need to make some progress, but like it's a very tight choke point. So I'm just kind of interested to see how it plays out, you know, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, when teams actually get some time on it.
Like, my main issue with the map is, and I'll always preface this by saying, I'm not just hating because it's a brand new map, because I know people do that, like, in general, but I'm actually open to the concept of new maps, especially because if you look in CSGO, some of the newer maps, like Overpass, etc., ended up being brilliant if you give them a chance, you know, so I am totally open to the idea of them being better, but, like, my initial impressions of this map in the context of being a competitive map aren't very good, I have to say. Like, first of all, when you said there, like, it just feels different, like, other maps, even ones that have unique elements to them, I can draw some conclusions. This map, the only comparison I can give you is, this map reminds me of what like those console Call of Duty games are like. Because it's like, in CS, part of what I think makes a map is like, what's the core philosophy? So, for example, people know on certain maps, right, on this map, you got to control this mid area. Or on this other map here, it's about the timing of when you hit a site, etc. This map feels, the reason I compare it to Call of Duty is this map feels way more like both teams rush to these exact same chokes that you all know everyone has to have a fight in, and you just have a gun duel there. That's it. Like, you get there, yeah, maybe there's a smoky fight around, but, you know, you're going to go to, you both just go to the same spots and you fight. Well, for anyone who thinks naively that's what CS is like, actually most of the maps aren't like that. Like, one of the great things about CS is most maps, you basically, even if you're CTs, you have a lot of choices. Like, right, do we defend really close up? Do we like give a bit of ground, but as a result, you know, like make them waste utility? Like, there's all sorts of like obvious things that present themselves. But at the moment, I do feel like some aspects of that are missing from this map. Like, I'm not sure if it's the structure or what, but it feels a bit off.
I think it's because I know what you mean, and I think it's because of the structure and the size, and it's another one of those maps where
it's also a very small map, like you say as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it feels like, and this is all theoretical, so this, I mean, obviously could be very different once you get a few months of practice and professional play on it, but it feels like because it's so small, and it's another map like Cobble, where it feels like there's no great opportunity for CT aggression, like nothing super reliable, which makes it feel like the mid-round decisions that CTs have to make are going to be very boring. Right? Because it's just going to be like, all right, well, we're playing retake at A. We haven't spotted anything there. There's no point for us to push the B bomb site because that's a death trap. And then let's just hold mid because they can't get either one of the bomb sites. So it feels like when you're on defense, there's not going to be a whole lot of decisions you have to make because you're already in positions of power pretty much across the map, unless you've gotten like picked off or lost a player or two and have to do something desperate. But I don't feel like you're going to get like that cool maneuvering that we get on other maps, you know, with a minute left in the round and it's a 3-on-3, and one of the CTs decides to push mid, or one of the CTs decides to get a pop flash and clear out holes so they can rotate quicker. It doesn't feel like you're going to have that kind of a sense to the map.
One thing that it does disappoint me about the whole process, though, of like bringing in the maps, moving out the maps, is this is another one of those areas where people say that Valve listens or that they're open to feedback, but I don't think they even have heard some of the ideas we've had. Like, I think some of the ideas that collectively we've had as a community have been pretty good. Like, I mean, one of the ones that I often recommend is a good way to time the maps would be make it into seasons. So if you have two majors, make the major the end of the season, and then therefore, you know, you build up into that. And then it would even have a cool aspect, you know, because you'd even be able to like sort of talk about, like it'd even be a different way to think of history. So for example, you'd think, oh, well, yeah, Team X, you know, won the first major of the year, but that's also because, you know, at the time Cash was in the
two
pool
new maps came in.
Yeah, exactly. There'd be like a great way to sort of like add additional context that we'd all remember. And it would even be, you could even make it so that like that'd be a little, I'd mentioned this on By the Numbers, that would be like an interesting wrinkle for teams, which is like, right, well, yeah, MIBR struggling now, but if they can get to July, you know, that's when this new map comes in, and then, you know, blah blah blah, whatever. Like, you can add that element in,
or just be able to track like which teams are really good at it, at like figuring out new maps. Like if you had two new maps come into the map pool at the end of the second major, and then this team, like, what if like 3 years in a row they win the first major of the year, and you're like, oh, really good at tactical innovations, they're very good at picking up these new maps and finding tricks. Like, that could be a whole new storyline that would come in.
Because the thing that does kill me, though, is I've always advocated for the idea that Valve should just have their own team of people who either direct like community map makers or they work on maps themselves. And the thing is, it's one of those things where, like, I don't entirely blame them. Like, no one knows how long an esports game's going to last. No one knew where CSGO would go. In fact, almost every year, we're never quite sure where it is. It's one of those scenarios where, in hindsight, when you look back now, considering they started the majors at the end of 2013, if you get that sort of a team up and running, even within a year, you'd still have a minimum half a decade, basically, to have a great impact, to bring a new map. And obviously, if you knew you were going to have your game last, say, 10 years, which looks like CSGO is going to get to at this point in time, if you knew it was going to last 10 years, you'd want some sort of plan in action like this. Because, like I say, I'm very open to the idea of having really good new maps. Like, you look at a lot of the maps we have right now, I don't mind seeing them played, because, you know, I have the context on them. But you know what? It wouldn't be the end of the world if Mirage had to go out for 6 months. As I say, especially if there is the option, like you said with Cash, to bring it back if it's like the map you bring in end up being terrible, you know. It's not the end of the world, especially if you ever do get a map like we have with the rework of Overpass, which is a fantastic map. Actually, I think Inferno has somewhat redeemed itself considering how wonky that looked initially when the rework first came out. Yeah, these are quality maps.
How long did it take? I don't really remember for Overpass and Cobble to get accepted. Because remember when they came in at that first major, everyone hated them. Like, well, they were crazy.
I can tell that that's where Valve actually really did get the feedback that like people fucking hated these maps, because they rework those maps quickly, mate. I'm talking like 4 or 5 months. Yeah, like within 4 or 5 months, they had the reworks like already in the competitive pool. So yeah. I think that was more just that the backlash was so huge.
That's one thing is I'm all for new maps. I'm always skeptical of new maps, but like they'll always fail if there's not like a good update structure behind them from the devs, right? Like, they need to be on top of their game with Vertigo, in my opinion. You know, listening to concerns, fixing bugs. I think they're going to have to change some things with this map as we go. So as long as they're on top of the ball, it's a fun experiment, right? What gets frustrating is when you just drop the maps in and don't touch them for like 3 months and just let everyone be miserable for a while. That's what scares me the most.
Sure. Okay,
but
right. Yeah.
Nah,
yeah?
I got it.
All right, whatever. What about, like, so another thing I wanted to ask about was, so ESL Pro League has begun, and we've seen, although they've got, on the Europe, for example, we've already played, in fact, in both regions, we've played 3 groups. There's the last group to go, and then after that, for people who don't remember, the format for this is only the top group winner goes straight to the LAN finals or whatever.
France, yeah.
The others go to like the next group system, which then weeds them out further. So one thing I've got to say is, even when I read that on paper, I actually didn't think to myself, what a fucking great system that is for to get the best teams to the LAN qualifier. You're just basically consistently playing best of 3 series against other good teams. Then you go to another set of best of 3s, all on LAN. It's like whoever doesn't make that LAN finals, there's not a lot you can really complain about them. Like, you had a very good crack at that.
There is actually one thing in North America that you can massively complain about. And I personally don't think it's as big of a problem, but I can see if you were one of the players, one of the competitors, how this would maybe piss you off a little bit. But the fact that our Group D is the Latin America group. So we have, like the 5th best Brazilian team. We have like a Colombian, Guatemalan mix. We have a team that has like Peruvians and Mexicans and one other team. I forget where exactly they're from. But these are all teams that haven't had international competition. And I think if you're like a team in Group A or like, MIBR or Cloud9 are fighting for the 2nd spot from Group C when they come in the follow-up week, if one of those guys doesn't make it, like, there's a really good argument that it's like, why does someone from Group D from Latin America get a free ride to France when, they're not the best team, they're not even in the top 4 best teams or whatever it might be across the whole event. So I think that will be a little bit of a point of contention. But on the other hand, I think people realize enough about how important it is to have representation in those smaller regions, to have them develop and give those regions a reason to exist with their own leagues. And eventually you have a stronger region overall over time. But for the moment, I think I could see that being a point of argument by the end of the season.
I have to say, though, just looking and like, it is so crazy how, in theory, if I watch a game and no one told me whether it's online or offline, as long as I can't tell in the game, it shouldn't really affect my enjoyment of it. But just knowing that the matches are on LAN and then seeing that they're best of 3s, it does make me immediately more interested. And I did feel like it was more important when I watched the games.
I feel like people don't really know that this entire season is on LAN. I don't know if that was like poorly communicated, but or I feel like I'm surprised at how little interest that's generated. Like, no one seems to be talking about the fact that for the first time ever, we have this league that's all entirely on LAN. And I don't know.
I think it's sick.
No, it's amazing. But I don't know if it's been like, if I'm ESL, I would have bombarded the community with that for like months leading up to Pro League, right? Like that would have been like a main selling point, is like the first time. The biggest issue we always had with our leagues was that because they were online, they didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like no one put any weight on any of the victories, so they couldn't actually change the standings or the top 10, or they couldn't like give you any reason to support this team or feel confident that this team would win the next time around because they were all online. Now that we finally have for the first time a league where a team's placing in the league can affect their standing in the top 10, and I think that's actually incredible. Like,
yeah, that's actually baller as well. You're right, because obviously even how you do in these groups, like for example, when I did my rankings, which to be fair I haven't done for a while, but I should get back to those. When I do my rankings, I actually do count like series that you win, for example, on LAN. So if you beat like MIBR on LAN, like Luminosity just did, that would give you a bump in the rankings. Whereas, if it was an online qualifier and you just beat them in, the 3rd round, I wouldn't really give a fuck about that. Yeah, you're right. That definitely does mean more. I would agree, actually. Now that I think about it, when you consider how much people complained about online CS over those last few seasons, including players, there has been a surprising lack of fanfare about the fact that these LAN... By the way, they've all played out without problems, really. They've just come to LAN, they played the groups out, some of them have been good games, some of them haven't, whatever. This is where people are too quick to complain, but they're so rarely like going to give you the opposite side and praise you if you did what they asked for. Because where are all the player comments? Like, oh, it's so great to play these games on LAN, and we're going to play. Like, you guys will complain like motherfuckers the last few years. Come on, you got to give them some credit when they do it right.
Yeah, I know, right? You'd think. But yeah, not a whole lot of that either. I think it's just a product of how much Counter-Strike we have, where Pro League has always struggled with being like a sexy product, hasn't it? And part of that has been because it was online. And I actually thought that them switching to LAN wouldn't fix all of that. But I thought it would generate more interest, and I was surprised that it hasn't. But it has always been one of those products that doesn't feel like it has a great place. And I'll tell you another reason why it might be an issue is these formats are great for the players, right? And then they're great for, well, mostly just the players to come in and play 3 days of games, and then your group is done within a week, and then you go home and you're fine. But that's not really like an actual season, Like part of the interest for fans and their team is watching a team's development and progression over a long period of time. That's why, the seasons were structured previously to be like 2 months long of best of ones, and you get to see the team for that long and how they rise or fall within the confines of that season. You don't get that same feeling here because it's like, oh, you come in for a week, you've done your business, we'll see you in a month. Or congratulations, you made it to France, we'll see you in a month and a half, whatever it might be. So I think part of the problem with a product that is supposed to be a season is that it is just like so short and that it's just done, and you don't get that same feeling the way you would if you were watching like a traditional sports season that's going to last 3-4 months, or whatever it might be, a long-term competition.
Yeah, I actually do think on that, like, because I would agree, like, that's obviously the weirdest part of what they've done is that like, it's called Pro League still, it's not a league. Like, I guess, you know, to be fair, like, E-League's also called E-League, and it's basically the E-League format if you look how they do it, which isn't a league. I would say the obvious solution would be something like, keep the same system you got now where you can't play a group on LAN, but just have more stages. So like the first group starts out and, you know, like the top 2 qualify, and then you go into another group system, and then you come back and you play that one 3 weeks later or whatever, you know, and like just get it so you have more games that are it, but it's like the same, it's all on LAN, it's still just 4 teams or whatever, but like go between the two. Because I agree, it is kind of like, this will sound weird, but at the moment, I find it hard to see what ESL gets out of it, because they went from having all those guaranteed games, all those fan bases that had to watch, in theory, all these different games. Whereas now, like, for example, if you're ESL, it hasn't happened, but let's imagine like Astralis had just bombed their group completely and come last place. Yep. You'd be smashing the computer, throwing it out the fucking window, wouldn't you? Like, that's one of the most popular teams right now. Like, what, they're out already and they can't possibly make the LAN finals. Like, that's not actually very good for most people. It's good for the team that beat them, but it isn't good for anyone else, basically.
It's terrible for the broad, yeah, because, I mean, you have the time that you can run the stream with them on it and attract those eyeballs and everything. I mean, this is basically the product of what not everyone, but a lot of the community has wanted over the past 3 years. Yes. They've wanted to see ESL and ECS work together and flesh out a schedule where they weren't conflicting. And if you do that, then you're like, oh, we have 3 months to run a season, but ECS is going to get these 6 weeks and Pro League is going to get these 6 weeks. And then now we have to water down the format to make the players happy between all these events. We have too much shit going on. We still do. And like, this seems to be a problem that everyone's kind of looking away from or forgotten about again. But this is not a compelling format for a viewer or for the broadcast team as storytellers who can't actually tell a story because you have 3 days per team. You know, you don't get to track something over the season. So, I mean, this is a very watered down format, it feels like. But again, whatever it takes, they had the benefit of, like, if they go to this format, they can get everyone on land, they can get all these teams through a studio. And I think that's been like what feels like number one priority for a while for our leagues. Is it was the one great thing that E-League had over every other TO when they were running seasons 1 and 2, which were long form, was that you actually have a season that can influence professional rankings. No other season or league has been able to do that before. So that is the big win for ESL in this one at the moment. And then the thing is, once you establish that you can do this and you get this up and running, you build upon it for the next seasons, right? Maybe you tweak a couple things. Maybe you change some things. Maybe you tweak the format. Maybe you add some different content. But at least you have these teams on land.
That's one thing I wanted to actually talk about on this topic, though, is like, in the past, when these were just online leagues, the obvious answer to where do we go from here would be, well, these probably won't exist one day. Like, you know, either it will be one big LAN league like the LCS or the Overwatch League, and you'll go there and you'll play that. In fact, that was actually part of the fear, was obviously those of us who love the open circuit, we don't want to get locked into a league which is not really great format anyway, and then have that replace all the LANs that we love to watch. But at the moment, when they've now transitioned this to being kind of like I say, it's basically just ESL's version of E-League. If you look at the format and how it's going to play out, and it's all on LAN, which, by the way, is cool. I always enjoyed the E-League tournaments for that. I always thought they did a great job with it as well, with letting the teams come and just play the matches and then go and then come back if you get the playoffs or not. I've always thought that was like a very shrewd way to do it. The problem is, where does this actually go? Because at the moment, in changing it from being a league and not being online, like, aside from the fact that they always did put a lot of prize money into the LAN finals, there's not actually as much of a reason for this to be its own thing. It's just another LAN tournament. Now, yes, it's a very good LAN tournament. I think it's well structured. But, like, do you think one day that these sorts of leagues will be surpassed? I mean, obviously, if there ever is a big televised league type thing, that would be the obvious thing that would displace them. Do you think that we'll always have ECS, EPL every year, and those will just be like lifeblood of the circuit? Where do you think we go from here?
I think that's a super interesting question. I think there's probably a lot of people with a lot of thoughts. I'm one of the people who thinks that these leagues, if we have this open circuit, and this whole exclusivity open circuit has always been a conversation lately, I'm of the mind that if we're going to have a league like this, the league should be exclusive. You should be, as teams, not closed. You should be able to, like, we should have relegations and teams move up and down in a whole system, but there should be one league because you can see this product doesn't have any interest in it. The thing with the league is you need to build that interest through content and through stories throughout the season. And if you just have these teams come in for 1 week at a time, there's no way to grow that story or that conversation or that content around them, because they're just in and out. And then you forget about them for a month before the finals. So I would like to see, if we're going to have leagues, whether it's ECS, whether it's EPL, whether E-League comes back and does something miraculous, we should have a league where our teams are exclusive to that one league, and the entire tournament circuit is open around that or within that, and the league can schedule around events as it chooses. But I think a league is a very weird product that esports and, well, at least Counter-Strike has not nailed down. The other thing that you could think about doing, and this is something that I thought would be an interesting idea, is at the moment with the way that Pro League and ECS are structured, they're kind of the products that really attract the core Counter-Strike audience. You know, like Cologne is such a spectacle. Katowice and the majors always bring in people from other games, and it gets a lot of hype throughout the gaming community as a whole. The leagues are more of like Counter-Strike's own baby. Like, it's pretty much the core audience who wants to tune into those and is interested in keeping track of these teams over the course of time and every event throughout the year. So why don't we do something where, like, why is there not a, you know, with this whole thing where we have these teams and players coming through on LAN, why is every week not like a community celebration? Why haven't we found a way to say, Pro League is going to be, you know, halfway between this professional competition, but we also want to bring like a more of like a CS Summit vibe to it? What if every week was like a mini CS Summit with the 4 teams that are there, and you get teams and you get players on the desk talking to analysts and talking to casters. The core audience gets to watch the games. You also get to hear from in-depth conversations with players and teams and talent. That could actually bring you some, and like more of like a celebration of the community that has created Counter-Strike. But it's clear, I think, to me, that this product needs something that's going to engage the audience a little bit more, because, you know, these aren't getting great viewership numbers. I think NA Pro League is sitting around in at like 10,000 most nights I see it, and then when like the big franchises, the Liquids, the Cloud9s, MIBR come in, it sometimes spikes up to like 30K, 40K. But for the most part, it's sitting right around 10 to 15,000. Europe's always been a little bit better, like 25 to 30,000, I think, if memory serves. But you know, I think this product just needs some little tweaks to it to make it a little bit more sexy and a little bit more attractive to the Counter-Strike audience.
I know in the past they used to stagger the leaves slightly, like they used to make ECS, I think used to always start like a bit after Pro League or whatever, but I always felt like that was another flaw they had, was whenever they had overlap with the online leagues, I don't think they realise, like I know each league themselves operates independently and they think all we care about is our league, but they don't seem to realise how much they fucked each other's storylines there, because I used to have the same problem myself. It's like I would try and keep track of like, right, so this team's won this match, oh wait, fuck, I'm thinking of EPL, in ECS they're doing fine actually, you know, in ECS, wait, because obviously that was also a part that was a terrible look for everyone, is that you'd have people who were like, oh, they're struggling in EPL, but then in ECS they're like second at top of the league. It's like, what the fuck's this shit? So that actually just cuts the legs out of both storylines. I always felt like, I know this is one of those things that you can only say as a community member where you don't have any interest in either company, but I wish there was some way they could have like, you know, made it like a season, like, right, I have the spring and then you do yours in summer and then I have one again in autumn and then you have yours in winter. You know, it's like we never overlap though. That way we keep like a coherent storyline for the online aspect. I know now it's not online for one of them, but you have like your own space, as it were, because that definitely does kill it a little bit. I mean, I think actually the ECS, is it completely though? Because I know ECS began a few weeks back, so.
I'm pretty sure they didn't overlap at all as far as.
That's good then.
But it's still, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. I remember like watching, got like super early. Like
everything was cutting out there for some reason.
Oh, you got me now?
Yeah, there you go. Say it again.
Hotel Wi-Fi. There was that one season where I remember exactly which one, but I think it was like NIP that like bombed out of like ECS, but like qualified for EPL in like third place, or maybe it was reversed. They bombed out of EPL and qualified for ECS super quickly. But like those are always super weird, especially when they're overlapping. But the biggest problem was I mean, this has kind of led to where we are now, but like remember they overlapped and it'd be like a team was late for the EPL matches and they would just like forfeit them and be like, oh, you were 20 minutes late. They're like, yeah, but we were playing an ECS match. I'm like, yeah, we don't care. Which is fair. Like, I can't blame ESL for doing that. Like, I have no problem with them doing that whatsoever. But that was always a huge, huge point of contention because, ECS was always the one that was like, oh yeah, your ESL match ran late. Yeah, we'll wait for you. We'll wait like 20, 30 minutes. But that always created problems at the end of the season where they had to play a bunch of makeup matches and everything. So there was never a really good way of doing it. And even now, I still think it's a little bit like, I'm not going to lie to you. I watched a lot of ECS season. I don't remember who the fuck qualified for their playoffs. I don't remember who did good in that season.
Yeah.
Like it's these league products until we can do it properly and do it the right way. And it's probably going to take some exclusivity to build a product that's actually worthwhile. I think a lot of these are going to get kind of like looked over a little bit, even though the prize money is great, even though the prestige is great.
I actually do think that you have something there with the idea of making it so that like same concept EPL has now. So you have the group of the 4 teams and they go there, and then the idea would be, you know, whoever's not playing a game or whoever's around waiting for their games not in 3 hours, you get some of those players, they join in the cast, or they, you know, like for example, you don't even have to just do it fun style. Like I know a lot of the time CS Summit or the old Home Story Cups, a lot of it was the angle of like you can banter and stuff. You can even just do it like, I know for LCS in League of Legends, they sometimes have like a secondary stream where it's like they have a couple of pros come on the secondary stream, and the point is they seriously break it down, you know, like they watch the game, and like obviously in League of Legends you can do it more specific, like, you know, you get 2 junglers and then they discuss what the junglers are doing in the game or whatever, you know, like it's a bit more streamlined in those games. But I could totally see that being amazing if you did it for something like Pro League, because the key thing is, except for CS Summit, you'll never be able to have that at LANs. Like at LANs, it's too serious. People have to practice. Anytime they have off, of course, you can't just ask a guy to come and do 3 hours of that if he's just finished a game. But in this setting, I agree with you. That would be a way to give it like a really unique flavor.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. And I mean, especially because it appeals directly to people viewing it. You know, obviously, if you're presenting yourself to like a mainstream audience or a wider audience from other, you want something a little bit more polished and you want something a little bit more professional. And if you're going to appeal to the core audience of Counter-Strike, you can be a little bit more silly, because we're always involved with Reddit. We know like the popular memes of the time. We know the funny jokes. We know, you know, the recent history. So you can actually appeal to that a little bit more, and you're appealing directly to the audience that's tuning in. But I mean, I think the key for this Pro League season for me is that the first step has been taken. We've gotten a season on LAN. That's huge. But now we need to develop it. Now we need to like build upon that for the next season, right? And the question is always, where do we want to take it? Or where does ESL want to take it? How exactly do they want to develop this product? Because they have something that no one else has. They have, you know, these guys, these players coming through a LAN studio every single week for 6 weeks. So, I mean, whatever you want to do with those people, like whether it's make content, whether it's make teasers for future events, whether it's interviews, whatever you want to do, they have it at their fingertips. And I think that's to see what they build upon for next season.
Right. There's a topic that when I bring it up, people are going to think I'm talking about a different topic that everyone has discussed to death the last week or so, which is Astralis skipping all these events, right? But I'm not going to talk about it on the angle of like Refresh and Astralis and Blast Pro League. That's to one side. Everyone's discussed that 1,000,000%. There's also not of the other angle that I actually did a video on, which is one of the facts I think actually Astralis haven't stopped to think about is now that they've limited the number of events they're going to, if they don't win those events, the era is basically over. Like if you just weren't at the events and someone else won them all, there is no era. Like to be an era, you have to maintain dominance, you have to keep winning, you have to, you know, keep the challenges off, as it were. This would be the equivalent of where like a UFC fight, you know, sometimes they get injured or they want extra time off and they go like a whole year without fighting, and then all the fans are like, you should strip them of the belt, like they shouldn't be the champion anymore, you know. Well, the angle I wanted to ask was this, which is forget even that part. The worst part of the number of events Astralis is skipping at the moment is there's now going to be so few events in the next 2 or 3 months where you have like a real sort of like meeting of all the best teams and you get to see them all battle and see how they do, which you think about the last few years where people have complained about, you know, oversaturation, and the old cliche was like, you see these teams play every week. It's like, we're not going to see some of these teams play each other in like the kind of match we want to. So I'll give you an example. One of the best things about Star Series for me was as soon as I saw the quarterfinal drawn, it was like Na'Vi versus Ents. Of course, everyone wants to watch that match again. Yep. That's exactly. We've all been waiting from the second that semi-final finished to run this one back again. Well, in similar fashion, who wouldn't want to see Team Liquid play Na'Vi in a match soon or something like that, you know, in a best of 3? But it's going to be a while before we get some of these matchups. So what do you think of this angle? Because The only time I can think of something comparable would be in times where the scene was just doing really badly and there weren't big enough events or teams couldn't travel internationally. Like, it's been a long time since we've had like this amount of downtime for some of the top teams to play a bunch of matches.
I mean, honestly, like I like it to a degree, right? Like we'll see how this is affecting them. I have to skip events for a long, long time. I've never been one to worry about how missing an event is going to affect someone like Astralis in like the HLTV top 10, because Astralis is getting invites even if they're ranked 11th. You know, like they're good enough and they've established dominance that if they drop down the HLTV top 10, which a lot of invites are based off of, they'll still be fine. I think I've been interested in seeing how something like this would play out, because, you know, I was always someone who got a little bit shouted down, but I always liked the idea of leading into the majors having no events for like 6 weeks. Like, just like don't have a single event and just let everyone just reset and chill out with professional Counter-Strike, and heading into the major you have all the best teams again that you haven't seen in a long time. So I'm interested to see how this goes with them. I think the tough part is even with all like the refresh conversation and whatever, you know, whatever theories you have about that or anyone watching has about that, I find it very difficult to be super critical of Astralis choosing which events to go to, even if they're blast events and not ESL events, or even if they're ESL and not blast events, whatever it might be. This is the number one team in the world and has been for over a year. They've been dominant with no end in sight. They're obviously doing something right. And if you want to talk about the teams who we expected at various times to catch up with them and be contenders, MIBR was one of them, and they have gone to every single event humanly possible, and they have shown no sign of improvement. FaZe is one of them, and they have gone to every event possible, and they have shown no sign of improvement outside of Rain kind of rediscovering that he's good at this game. Navi has been very hit or miss, and they've gone to most events, and they are now also trying to mimic a little bit more of Astralis. Liquid has gone to pretty much every single event and has never been able to make that final jump to be able to beat Astralis. So you have all these teams that have been, you know, just overloading their schedule, while Astralis has been, you know, working on, you know, decreasing it and making it better and making it more responsible. And they've maintained dominance while no one else has been able to catch up. In fact, the biggest jump we've seen in any performance of any team in this scene has been ENTS. And you know what? They weren't a team that was even invited to most of these events. They had plenty of time to sit back at home and practice and just work on things together. And then they came into the major and they surprised everyone. So there's got to be something to having a more professional structure where you're taking some of these events off. I mean, and I say that, I know there's the issues with the refresh and the conflict of interest and everything like that, but I still find it very difficult to be too critical of a team who has maintained position as the best team in the world for over a year, something which has never been done before with such level of dominance. You know, so yeah, it sucks. It's a bummer that we don't get to see Astralis and we don't get to see some of these as much as possible, but I can't really argue with the results.
Yeah, but that's the problem for me. Is that the key distinction is this. I wouldn't have any issue whatsoever with it. Well, I mean, obviously, as you say, the conflict of interest thing would exist anyway. But aside from that, I wouldn't actually care if Astralis chose to go to Blast Pro Series if they also would do, like, let's say they said, right, okay, so we only want to, I remember originally they did try to imply this, we only want to do one event a month, was what they originally said, right? Well, that's the problem. If you then choose that event to be a Blast Pro Series event, well, now I'm going to have to complain because it's not a tournament with a big format, it's not going to be the matches I want to see. Like, if you did that as on the side, so for example, you said, right, well, we don't Blast Pro Series because it's a day and a half, so we'll do like, in this case, I'll give a random example. We'll do Star Series or we'll do DreamHack Masters Dallas. And then on top of it, yeah, we'll do this DreamHack Blast Pro Series that's 2 weeks later. That's one thing, but that's the killer for me. Is like, it doesn't, the problem is, you are right. Like, yes, their approach has been more successful. So their approach has proven itself very, very good. But they also did go to all the big tournaments with it as well. So the killer for me is like, I'm not saying that they won't be the best team. If they don't go to these tournaments but they haven't lost, most people in their heart, the spirit will be that they're the best team. But the problem is, it will be whack if in 3 years you look back and you were like, that's weird. Why did they only go to like 4 lands and they lost 2 of them? And you have to tell them, oh, they chose not to go to the other ones. Like, that is going to seem a bit bizarre if you look at the context of history.
Yeah, but you know who that would hurt more than anyone is the Astralis players if they look back and realize they just like destroyed their own legacy.
Of course,
you know.
yeah.
So I mean, if they want to take that risk like that, I'm
I
hoping,
agree. Yeah,
I would imagine they've had that conversation where it's like maybe in 3 years we really regret this, and it's like yeah, but you can't worry about that now. So let them do it. I think again, and if here's the thing, if we see Astralis start to slip a little bit and maybe lose some of that reputation, maybe lose some of that armor of being so dominant, I think we see them start to come to more of these events.
sure.
You know, I think they start accepting more of the big events, the Sydneys and the DreamHack Masters and everything, and they get back to them because I think, you know, at a certain point, you know, they have had no one that's close to touching them. So at a certain point, you are kind of like, why are we killing ourselves with this travel? We have nothing to prove. We beat everyone all the time. So let's just chill and relax and you know, we'll come and see how things are a month from now. So, I mean, yeah, it's a bummer in a certain way as a viewer, especially for the storyline of who's going to fight Astralis, but we've been fucking pounding that storyline for 8 months now, haven't we? And no one's ever come close. So, yeah, if they want to do it, fine. I'm cool with it. I think this conversation only really gets super interesting if you start taking it down the conflict of interest route and all the different accusations against them and everything.
Sure. Right. Actually, one team to actually specifically talk about some players and some teams, not more like community stuff here. You brought them up, so let's talk about MIBR because I have to say this is an example of a team where, considering they only actually like, I know they made the roster move officially at the end of last year, but obviously there was no tournaments that they played in until the major, so it feels like they only made the roster move like a month and a half ago or 2 months ago at this point in time. So if you look at the actual amount of tournaments they've played, normally I would say, well, let's not go too crazy, you know, give them a bit more time, let's see how it goes. But I think if you actually weigh up all they've done with this new roster, dude, I don't really have any optimism for it. I really hoped that this roster could work. I thought there was some potential here, you know. I even look at them now and still think, man, how are these players this bad? Like, this doesn't even make sense, you know. Like, I could understand the Stewie 2K Tarek one, because it's obviously like such a clash of cultures and languages and all that. So, like, there's no way this lineup should be this bad. Like, I kind of feel like, I'm not even saying this as like an alarmist. If they had the option, I'd pull the plug on this lineup. I'd make some drastic changes, like bring in 2 different players, or you know, go for the big buyout of one of these other Brazilian players, or let one of the players leave. Like, you know, if like at the moment the implied dichotomy in the team is one day you're gonna have to pick between Fallen or Cold Zero. That's been what's kind of been brewing for a long time. Well, maybe it's time to make that choice. Whichever direction you go, by the way, has pros or cons. So I don't mind either way, but I kind of feel like, for the benefit of everyone, and even for the benefit of the Brazilian scene, like, this lineup surely can't keep going. I mean, if you just... Here's the killer for me, Moses. It's one thing if you lose and you do badly, but if you even just look at these players and you look at how they're losing, they look like they have very little confidence in themselves. Like, the morale looks shot to death in this team.
They have a really, really bad identity crisis. I agree with you. It just looks like they don't know... They look so uncomfortable at times this week during EPL when they were playing matches. Like, they didn't properly know how to rotate. They didn't know like when they were supposed to take fights. The communication seemed a little bit off. But here's the thing. I was really skeptical of this like roster reunion because we've seen it play out before with Fnatic, and it never works. Like, these lineups, like they break up for a reason. And when you bring them back together, like you remember all the good times, you don't remember the bad times. Katowice was fine for such a new roster, but WSG was one that really hurt.
I know, that's a killer.
Star Ladder really hurt as well, but
I mean, even here, EPL, like I was making this point on By the Numbers. People will forget this, but like the idea MIBR's core would lose on LAN in a best of 3 to another Brazilian team is unthinkable. Like, they used to always dominate those IMT guys every time they played them. Like, it was always going to be a given they would beat them.
If you have any optimism and any faith, the only thing that you can hang your hat is that they have had such an insane schedule. And this is a good contrasting conversation to Astralis, but they haven't had any time between these events to work on or practice or improve in any regard. Like, they did Katowice, a week later they're in China straight to Brazil for Blast Sao Paulo, straight back to China for Star Series, straight to Miami after that for Blast Pro Series, and then straight to LA, which is back home, but that's for the week they had to do their group stage of Pro League. So I don't know when. I think there's maybe like 5 days off where there's no matches and no travel within that sequence that I just mentioned. like total across like a month and a half. So I mean, like, what do you expect to happen? You're not going to improve that way. Like you're not going to get better as a team if you go on that kind of a schedule. And if things go wrong in tournament number 2, they're going to go wrong in tournament number 4 as well, because you just simply don't have the time or the resources to improve them. So, I mean, I don't know what anyone kind of expected once we saw how they started this little run, but they need some time off, and then they're going to get a little bit of it here, but they need to really sit down and figure things out. They cannot do this on the fly. They cannot do this the way they've been doing. If they actually want this roster to work, this is going to take, you guys need to take like 3 weeks off of events and sit down in boot camp and just grind your fucking faces off.
Like, the main problem I see here is like, this is the thing that team owners should really think about, is it depends on what type of team you have as to how many events you want them to attend. Because in this kind of a setting, I can think of 2 very good reasons they would attend all these events. So, like, first of all, since they're not actually doing very well, it's a great way to still provide value to your team owner. Like, you go, hey, you're still gonna have all this exposure, I'm gonna be all the big events, like definitely that plays into a lot of things that team owners like. And then secondly, because you're not doing very well, you also, some teams have the mentality of like, right, well, it's like the old cliche of like, how do you get over someone? You know, that thing where they're like, get under someone, they were trying to always tell people like, quickly go out and try and like, get the stink off you, as it were. Like, it's kind of like that. Some teams want to do that. They're like, right, if we did shit at this tournament, it's good. That's okay. We've got another tournament next week. Like, we'll reset. We'll do it all again. But here's the difference is when you talk about a team that we're discussing now, where like, they've never really with this lineup gotten it together yet. Like winning a map against fucking Astralis at Blast Pro Series doesn't make up for all the problems you've had recently. Like, that ain't good enough.
They didn't even get this roster together the first time where they won, because the conversation throughout even that streak of winning events was like how much dysfunction and how much like they couldn't figure out, Phelps and Fur and who was going to play how aggressive and everything. So, I mean, they even had confusion last time this roster was together.
But like, the killer for me is like, if I was a team that had all those problems, literal identity problems with who's going to play where and how and what is our overall style, and as you saw, in fact, until recently, they didn't even know what their map pool was, dude. They were just playing anything. Like, they were even playing Nuke eventually. So, like, that type of a team, as you're saying, you don't want to send that team to 4 tournaments in a row because they need, like, some downtime. They need time to reflect on things. The teams that I always understood is, like, for example, I totally get why they sent FaZe Clan to every event, Moses, because that was a team that even used to say, like, they would even I don't know if they've said it publicly, but I know privately they would just admit, like, they would just admit like we're not very good at practicing, basically. So like basically like going to tournaments really does keep us in form. And if you even think of the type of personnel you have in a FaZe Clan, because so much of FaZe Clan's strength was like, did the individual players play well? It almost is worth going, right, well, if it didn't work well this event, go to the next one. Surely like 2 of us are going to be on fire at that one. That's like one of the few teams in history that almost works for as a mentality.
Yeah. Well, it's like you have a bunch of shooters, so the only way to get a shooter out shooting, just keep setting them there. And yeah, they have that style and they've never wanted to be the tactical team. So, I mean, you don't necessarily need a lot of time off to sit down and kind of individually deathmatch, like that kind of individual prowess comes and goes at times. Yeah, the map thing is really head scratching for MIBR. I'm assuming they went to Nuke because there'd been whispers around the major that they'd been practicing and getting pretty good at it. They started out by picking Inferno, and their Inferno once again has betrayed them in a massive way. There's 3 and 5 on it. They're picking Trey now as well, which is not as dominant as it used to be. So they've got a lot of questions they need to figure out in this downtime. I think that the scariest part about this team is if you do like a little bit of a deep dive, not even that deep of a dive, but if you dive into like some of the interviews these players have given, like the Taco interview in Sao Paulo at Blast is unreal. He looks so defeated when he's talking about the struggles that team is going through. I think it was an interview as well, like just after they had gone like 0-4 in front of their home crowd, and he's just fucking destroyed. So I'll give you a barometer. Like, as weird as this sounds, it's actually a really positive thing when pro players are getting mad at me and trying to clap back at me on Twitter or say things like, oh, he's wrong when he says we're not that good. Because what that means is, at least privately, you secretly think you are still better than I say you are. Or, like, you think I've just like, I'm being too harsh and, whatever. When teams are like they are now, where they're just like you say, they're just defeated. Like, if you tell them like, yeah, you're terrible, like, yeah, we are, it sucks. It's like,
That's not even fun anymore, because then that's like, right, if even you know it's gone to shit, what the fuck do any of us do? Like, we can't even make this fun at this point in time, can we? It's just depressing. It's depressing all the way around.
No one likes beating up on someone who's already extremely, extremely fucking sad. And that's the impression I get from all of MIB. Like, hopefully sad, but still very sad. I'm at the point where I don't really know what this team does. And I think part of the issue is like, man, like, what do you even do? Even if MIBR makes the decision, they say, you know what, this core has run its course. We want to get 2 new people in here. We're going to drop whoever. Let's just say Fallen and Fur for whatever reason. Like, who do you pick up in the Brazilian scene? They already tried to go younger and get like the Case Seratos and the buyouts or something mental. VSM is another guy who's here in Pro League, whose name has been thrown around. Had that cool article from HLTV come out on him, who's got some hype and interest. He can't play in majors. He's got a VAC ban. So, like, who are you even going for? Like, who would you even turn to pick up? You've tried the experiment of speaking English and getting North American players. By the way, this is also the one argument you could have made to not have dropped Stewie and Tarek is eventually you're going to have to go for new players. And if you're limiting yourself to Portuguese players, it's not going to be a great time. So, I mean, they're just in a really weird spot that it doesn't seem there's no very clear right answer for them to get out of it, which is tough.
Especially because, like, for anyone who hasn't been like reading between the lines, the reason KNG is not in this lineup is it is implied that he can just never be in this team. Because for anyone who doesn't know, I've already mentioned this in the past, he clearly did not write that apology. The apology was clearly written as part of a campaign to eventually allow him to potentially join this team. But they did the first steps of it, and then the last step, which was he would join the team, didn't happen. Now, I don't blame, if you know all the complicated history, there's a lot of baggage there that I get. And in fact, one of the things we've seen recently is he's had visa problems again. So unfortunately, that alone is a killer at this point in history. If you can't really enter the USA reliably, I don't blame anyone for not picking you up. I don't care who you are, pretty much. Unless you were like Simple, I don't know if I'd gamble on it. So the main problem I have is like you say, is there's no real clear direction. So whatever you do is a gamble. And in fact, here's the interesting one for me. Here's what I want to ask you. Is, like I said, if you look at the problems in the team over the last couple of years and you look at the direction of like who could leave, who could stay, it does seem like at some point you are going to pick between coldzera and Fallen. Like, you're either going to build around coldzera and bring in someone else at one point in time, or you're going to say to Fallen, let's start a new project, you and a couple of other players, and you bring in the players you want. And my question to you is this. If you had that Brazilian scene Sophie's Choice moment like that, which of the two do you pick? Because I don't think there's a wrong answer. That's the thing I think is interesting. I know to a fan, maybe they would go one way or the other very clearly, like, well, I'd pick this guy for this reason. I feel like it's one where I could totally see someone going either way on that one. So which would your choice be?
Oh, you can think about this so many different ways, can't you? I mean, for me, if I'm thinking like pure Counter-Strike, I stick with Zera and try and get Fallen to switch into like a managerial position behind the scenes. At the other hand, if you're a team owner, you're probably thinking that Fallen brand is so valuable in the eyeballs and the social media and the draw and everything. He's fucking massive celebrity in Brazil, so you'd probably want to go with him to keep some of the eyeballs and some of the interest. But I would stick with coldzera, keep him on the team, try and get Fallen to do something managerial where he could also focus on his own business endeavors in the side, and then you kind of start to build a team like that. There's also a third option, which you didn't mention, and it's one that I actually think might be the better one, and that would be dropping Fur. And it's not because I think Fur is a bad player, and in fact, he's playing phenomenally for this team, which makes it, a little bit silly to mention him as the one. But if you look at how this team is structured, at this point, if you're going to bring in a young player from any region across all of Counter-Strike, they're going to be far more aggressive than the older players. They're going to be far more dynamic and playmaking kind of mindset. And if you're bringing, and we see it a little bit with Phelps as kind of the young player on this team. So if you have Fur on the team and you want to get younger, you're always going to have a conflict with who wants to be the aggressor, in the strategies or in the rounds, and who wants to be the one pushing up to make a play. And at the moment, it's Fur, and he's for good reason. He's not having that role taken away from him because he's been so good at it for so many years, and he has a pedigree of winning championships. But if you get younger and you bring in new players, and those new players want to be aggressive and want to be playmakers, there's always going to be a conflict specifically with Fur. So at a certain point, I think you have to make that decision of whether that, or you just have to find a young player who like doesn't care to be aggressive, which just seems to be like every young player these days seems to have some aggressive bone in their body in the way, in the style they like to play.
Sure. Not least because it's very hard to get people's attention if you don't. So it's almost like
you have to be
built
the
into it,
standout player. Yeah, yep.
That really is the
cycle. Yeah.
No, that's what's sad is there is really a catch-22 scenario like that. Like basically in the past, what you used to do is, you used to be the star player of the team that's coming up, and that's what would get you to recruited. But as you say, that just gets you on the team. Now, getting on the team is like half the battle. Like, if you get on the team and you don't have the right roles, you're going to fail and you're going to be the next guy out the door. Plenty of people in history have shown us that. So the real problem is, you're going to almost have to show yourself to be better than the current player in the team who does the thing you want to do. But you're going to have to prove that while you're already on a worse team without all the benefits that player would get. So I agree, it's a nightmare scenario if you're a young player. Yeah. Though the thing with that is, the reason why I didn't include that is, like, I don't mean, like, literally which player do you remove next? Because I agree.
You mean, what do you start a new team?
I just mean in the future, I feel as though, after seeing, like, the team they had last year and this year, I feel like the actual core itself is sort of cracked. Like, that core isn't what it used to be. Like, it doesn't have the same qualities that even that used to. So even if it's not right now, I feel like one day they're just going to come to that point where you pick between those two. Because for me, like, coldzera has clearly over the last year or so shown, like, he hasn't really enjoyed these lineups, I can tell. I don't care what he says in interviews. He doesn't look like he's particularly enjoyed, like, not being in a position to win, some of the flaws they've had with even getting the basics in place. Like, he's a guy who wants to win already. Like, he doesn't want to wait to build something out, a project for 6 months. That's why I think he was very smart, actually, by alluding to the idea of, like, oh, maybe I could have played with Nico. Oh, Team Liquid wanted me to join. Like, he's been public with that because it's a clever idea to put, like, their fire under MIBR's feet, as it were, of, like, get this shit together or I can go tomorrow. And if you look at the moment, bearing in mind he's had a couple of really bad tournaments in the last few months, like, that's going to put even more pressure on a guy like that, because if he now himself is failing and he doesn't think the team setup's good, that's going to, like, there's even more impetus to be like, let's fix this. So the reason why I said to you, I don't think there's a wrong answer on that one is, like, if you have coldzera, he's such a good player that I don't know who else you would recruit. Like, I don't know who you'd get as an in-game leader, but maybe it works. Maybe they can use him well and he can still be great. And obviously, if you want to build a team, having a brilliant star player is a great starting place. But the thing is, you can obviously, and anyone who's followed Counter-Strike a long time will know this, the other great person to build around is a good in-game leader. So just as in-game leader, star players are hard to find, so are fucking in-game leaders. So I have to say, there's a part of me, whether it's an MIBR or another Brazilian team or even an international team, I, at some point in time, want to see Fallen given another crack with, like, a new group of people. So that could either be like Carrigan and Mouse now, you know, you go international, you get a bunch of other good players, or you get the bunch of other Brazilian players. And that way, if you've lost your identity with this squad, which for me, they've lost their way big time, you can start from zero there. And the key thing is, all the other Brazilian players, in theory, are going to be very receptive to anything Fallen has to tell them. Like, even if his stock with other players has dropped, you would think he could start, or he could reinvent his entire style of the game if he wanted.
Yeah, which will, I mean, that's going to kind of, I mean, he's kind of trying to do that now, isn't he? And that's the one big head scratcher is, like, even if this is why I would pick coldzera over him, is he hasn't shown the ability to, I mean, it's been 2 years basically since they were last competing for championships, like, on a consistent basis since, like, late 2017. Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of opportunities, a couple different lineups now with Tarek and Stewie in there. Now he's reinvented this one, and he hasn't shown, like, as much credit as he got for being such a phenomenal in-game leader back in, like, 2016 and 2017. He hasn't shown that ability. Your faith
a bit, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, individually fallen off, like, in terms of how impactful he is with his own opping. So that I think would be the biggest scary thing, and I think that kind of like name value of Fallen going to a younger Brazilian team, I think that would fade pretty quickly if he didn't show some promise on one of those levels again, right? Like, if he didn't show some results early on, I think that his stock would plummet even with the younger players who respect him for the legend that he is. Playing with him would be a different beast, I think.
That's why I always tell people the real move that I want, because I feel like it's an obvious scenario to try out as an experiment, is if FaZe Clan are going to keep saying, we want an in-game leader, just essentially we won't let anyone join because no one can be as good. It's like, I would love to see Fallen get a go on that team. Because it's like, here's the thing that's interesting is, he's in the same position now that actually Existence was the last couple of years, which is, in the French scene, nobody wanted Existence. None of them would have given him a shot. I know that sounds weird because they did give him a shot eventually, but that was a very weird set of circumstances. But what Existence himself didn't seem to appreciate was that in the French scene, his stock was very low. But internationally, most players, actually, believe it or not, still thought very highly of Existence because they remembered the old days when he was one of the best and how good his team. So what's mad is he could actually have reinvented his career years ago by going to like a mouse sports type team and just saying, right, I'm going to be an international player now. So I actually think that that's like would be another great way to reinvent yourself, because if you bring in someone like Fallen, I can tell you, knowing pro players, the players in FaZe Clan will respect the fuck out of someone like Fallen because they've lost to this guy. They've seen him take players they thought were worse. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, if someone like Nico loses to a lot of the MIBR players, he doesn't really in his brain think they're better than me. He just thinks like, nah, fuck, why don't I have a team as good as them? You know, why don't my teammates play around me that way? Or why don't I have a guy who helps? You know, that's really what you think if you're like a superstar player. So if you get your chance to get like the best in-game leader, at least in your brain still, of course you're going to go for it. Of course you're going to say, I'll give that a shot. And that would be a sexy as fuck move.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that would actually be really, really interesting to out. I think the hard part with someone like with a team like FaZe is at the moment, yeah, like I believe them when they say we're looking for an in-game leader and we want a new in-game leader. I think the problem is when you look at every other player on their team, like we know the star-studded super team roster, you're going to be looking for an in-game leader that has the same resume as
like
your
who can
star
command
players,
the respect
right?
of these players? Come on.
Yeah, you're not going
That's the most intimidating locker room in the world to walk into.
But you know, like you're not, if you're FaZe, you're not going down to like MDL and you're like, oh, this in-game leader's done a great job getting this team prepared to come into Pro League and see what they can do. Let's snatch him. You're going to be looking for someone who's won a major. You're going to be looking for someone who has like invented a meta or a style of play that was really difficult to deal with for like 4 or 5 months. And there's not a whole lot of people with those credentials. So I can imagine that if they really want to get like a hardcore in-game leader, like they're going to have to lower the bar. They're going to have to lower the standards, which introduces you to a whole other lot of risks. But I find it interesting. I don't know what the fuck's going on with FaZe, because I didn't like Dren put out a tweet that he was like, my future in FaZe will be decided in the next 2 weeks or something like that before that slew of events. I don't know where's the announcement on that? Is Dren going to be there forever? Are they liking him? Is he getting better with his communication? Like, what is it? Is Nico still okay enough to in-game lead? You know, all that kind of jazz. I don't know what FaZe is really going to be up to. But I think it is funny seeing it just so reinforced how much of an individual team that is, because the jump they have and how dangerous they are when just rain.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Like when they've had Nico all year. By the way, this is super underrated. Nico's had an incredible start.
He's bonkers, mate. Yeah.
This is
individually.
Like game, yeah.
This is half the problem I have with him. I have to say this every time we ever discuss FaZe. I always have to tell people the problem is there's obviously two Nicos. One guy is playing the role of in-game leader, and then simultaneously there's another guy who's the same person playing the role of star player. And if you divide the two up, as a star player, Nico's fucking killing it. Like, I can't criticize him at all. The problem is I have to then use the same name to criticize a player as an in-game leader who's doing kind of a bit of a whack job, actually. Like, I don't think he's doing a very great job. So I agree, that's a very tough one to separate, because I still think individually he's a fucking insanely good player. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah, in some senses, I almost even give him more credit in a mad way, because it seems even worse now for my money. So the idea he's this good consistently is unbelievable.
Yeah, he's mental. I mean, and I remember Yanko Katowice that Nico is playing the best Counter-Strike of his career in like their boot camp leading up to the major. So I mean, it's kept up after Katowice. But yeah, I mean that this team just like so much relies on that, and just to have one player like Rain step up the way he did in Miami, like this team looks so much more dangerous. And if you just get like 20% of a jump up from like Olaf and Guardian, this team can be contending for trophies, and it's so scary to think about that.
That is the killer to me, by the way. Like, here's the problem that FaZe has. It's not just like the whole Nico in-game leader aspects. I agree, obviously, it's a very, very limited pool of people you can even get if you're going to need to fit all those. But that's its own issue. The bigger issue to me is like Olofmeister's been pretty bad this year in general. Yeah. And obviously, like, I know this sounds harsh to say, but they basically did tank half of last year waiting for this guy to come back. So when you do that, that's kind of like investing into him. What you're saying is, right, we're willing to blow literally potentially the chance to win the Intel Grand Slam, all sorts of things. We're not going to move on from you. We're going to give you a chance to come back. And then hopefully, even if it's one last ride, we're going to go hard on that last ride. And the problem is, the last ride literally ended up coinciding with when they did all the in-game leadership, where they immediately short-circuited the team again. So the problem is, like at this point in time, if I just looked at Olofmeister as a player and I removed the name, I'd remove him tomorrow, mate. Like, it doesn't look like it's a great fit. But the other issue is, like, both Olofmeister and Guardian, they're also in positions in their career where, for all we know, if you fire them, they might just retire tomorrow. They might retire anyway in 6 months. Like, they really are in that spot in their careers. So that's why it also gets tricky, because sometimes if you get those, like, if they tell you inside the team, this is probably my last team, by the way, like you'll sometimes give them more chance, because obviously it always is going to feel nicer for Fiflaren to retire than to be fired. Like, so one of them is a lot easier to sell to everyone, isn't it? That this is like a celebration. It's like, you don't want to be like, you're fired. Well, I was going to quit anyway in a month. Doesn't matter. Get the fuck out. Like, that's no one enjoys that exit, do they? Like,
that would be next level. I mean, no, I agree entirely. I think if FaZe was to win the next major, say, like if they win in Berlin, I think we see definitely Guardian retire on top after lifting a major trophy.
I think there's a very good chance of that, yeah.
And I think there's probably a very good chance that Olaf would do it as well. Either way, whether that happens or not, I think 2019, FaZe is going to get to a point where they're going to have to make that decision at some point during this year, during the next 7 months. They're going to be forced to make a decision, and if they want to cut one of those players, it's going to get there.
Well, this is the problem, right? This just shows how it can be weird how people like perceive the same information differently based on like what their like metrics are. Because what I saw from FaZe when they just won this Blast Pro Series event, to a normal person, they might go, "Hey, great news, Thorin! Did you see the event? Like, they did so much better, they might win." And it's like, that just shows how we interpret things opposite. Because when I see that event, what I see is in line with what you said. I go, right, so Rain is playing way better the last few months. Nico is literally one of the absolute best players in the entire world. Like, he's the main contender to Simple right now. That's like the level he's on. If you have all of that, and that's what it took to win this event, it's like, you're in big trouble. Like that's not, you can't rely on that every event. Like that's not even like that's not a strategy. That's not a system. Like, it's like I always say about Na'Vi. Like, the reason why Na'Vi have actually really sort of like this 5-man lineup of Na'Vi, the reason it has outstayed its welcome is because it didn't win that many championships with probably the best individual player to ever play CSGO. Like, someone's going to look back one day and go, wait a minute, why didn't they just make a change if they were never winning? Like, wasn't that guy the best? And it's like, at the time, because remember, their team was way worse before they got Zeus back. Like, chronologically, it makes sense where they're at. But actually, if you look at what the win conditions are, you're asking too much if you think that that's going to happen event on event. Like, I agree. I think FaZe is another team where they need to sort of like pick which half of the team is going to be here next year and move forwards. Especially because in their team, like, I know there have certainly been some behind the scenes things suggesting they don't have like the insane money bags they used to have. But at the same time, a lot of people are going to want to play with some of these players. And the fact you're an international team, you get so many choices. There are so many interesting routes. Unlike MIBR, where like it's hard to figure out where you go. This team, there's a million directions we can go, and they can all be great potentially.
Yeah, I imagine. I would have to imagine internally FaZe hit clock at major and say if we don't see something special at the major, then we're moving on. And even for me, I would have started thinking about it way earlier. Yes. But I mean, you can see like the strength of this team, because I mean, going back to when they even formed, like the story around this team was like, you have Nico, you have one of the best players in the world. He's going to get his 20 to 30 kills per game pretty consistently. Like, you're going to rely on that. And one of these other guys is going to step up next to him. Between Olaf, Guardian, and Rain, one of these players will surely go off with him. And that's what you got out of that phase at the start, and we're just not seeing it now. Like, Guardian is either the incredible Guardian that we saw at the E-League finals against Cloud9, or, you kind of, forget at times that he's in the server. Olaf is a very similar thing. Either he has very little impact or very little kills but wins some clutches for you, or he has very little kills and loses some clutches for you. It's at the moment, it's gone the other way. So they're going to be at some point this year put at like a fork in the road situation as well, and they're going to have to make that call. And being FaZe and having Nico, they should be able to draw some people to this team. It should not be hard. And I'll tell you what, if I'm FaZe, I'm looking over at this Cloud9 thing, and I'm saying, if they can't get this roster situation figured out, why aren't we bringing in Automatic? Why aren't we bringing in Timmy Ta?
I mean, the thing is, like, the crazy thing about the FaZe ones, like I say, there are so many options, and there's very few of them look bad. Like, there are so many good players that would play in FaZe Clan and would change the complexion of the team and would make you really, really sick. Especially because, as you allude to, as long as one of the players you keep is Nico, and it's pretty certain at this point in time that is the player you have chosen to, like, hitch your wagon to, he is so absurdly good. All you need is one other player who's really good, and you're immediately cooking with gas. And that's one thing I think people misunderstand about CS, is that it's kind of like basketball in this sense. Is like, if your star players really are good enough, they can pretty much carry the kind of scoring load. The rest of the people's job is fit around them and make a coherent style. Like, that's the reason why I've always generally modelled it in Counter-Strike that you need like 2-star players, is because as long as the 2-star players really do their job and they frag out, it's like Get Right and Forest back in the day, or, any of the players you want. Generally, the other players are there to do things like fit, play a certain sport, be a follow-up person, be an entry, whatever it might be. They fit around. That's why they're role players. So the fact that FaZe is so dysfunctional just shows that they've never really been able to comfortably fit some of the other players who were used to being star players into those roles. Some of them could kind of sort of do it. And then I always thought in a weird way, like, they kind of cheated in a way, because it's like they were sort of doing a role, but they also could sometimes frag out and just win the game. So it's like that made you in your brain think, oh, this is fine. But for anyone who hasn't watched much CS, what you see when you see Astralis, where there's a many games that like all of them are fragging and they're all similar on the scoreboard, that's like some alien shit. You can't make a team like that. Like, that's, nobody can reverse engineer that team. I mean, they didn't reverse engineer it, like they just locked into it. So I wish we could all have teams like that, but that's just not a realistic expectation. Yeah. But the good news is, if you have Nico, you're already halfway there to having a really good team. You just got to get the other part in place.
Yeah.
Because those are the two teams. I mean, I would have added MIBR, but they're just in such bad form, I can't. The two teams who have the most obvious chance to transform and immediately be big competition to Astralis are clearly FaZe Clan and Na'Vi, because both of them have one of the absolute best players in the world in insane form. And if you can just put someone else, because the thing is, on paper, I do pick Team Liquid, but Team Liquid have their own shit going on that has nothing to do with Astralis, and they got to fix before I can start putting them in that category.
I've pretty much accepted the fact that Liquid can beat anyone in the world except Astralis, and it just feels like they're never going to be able to beat Astralis. The problem, the thing that sucks the most about FaZe and Na'Vi, because I agree, those are the two close to being able to contend with Astralis, is they both feel like they're about one roster change away, and they both seem the most resistant team to making a roster change. They just
won't make the fucking roster move, will they? Like, what's mad is, the weirdest one is this, Moses. Like, I actually get the FaZe Clan one, because at the moment they're making it like, but the guy has to be an in-game leader. Like, they've sort of like created their own really bizarre set of circumstances, which, yes, if you accept that premise, then at the end of that series of conclusions, they're right. Like, there aren't many people you can pick from, and you've got to kind of hope that one becomes available. The one that doesn't make any sense is the Na'Vi one, because over the last year or so, remember, go all the way back to before the Face It Major, the London one. Even before that, there were all these rumours and comments in interviews that, like, morale's bad in the team and they're having practice issues and maybe Flamey is going to quit the team. There was all sorts of things. And every few months we've had the same rumours surface, yet they never, ever give a good reason in interviews as to why they won't make a roster move. Like, they never actually seem to address that part of the topic. Like, they never say, like, this is another, I'll tie it into the MIBR one. For people who don't know, forget even public examples of players clapping back at me. If you go privately and you ask, like, MSL, God B, Sean Gares back in the day, what's going on with your team? Like, where are you at? Like, what do you need to improve? They can answer all these questions. It doesn't matter what level their team's in. They'll have, like here's where I'm at. Here's what I think I'm going to do. Here's what I'm trying to do next. They could give you all this certainty. If I go and I ask Fallen now, I can tell you he'll be absolutely honest and just say, like, yeah, we're in bad shape right now. Like, I don't really know what we're going to do. Like, we're trying stuff out. out. Let's hope it works. I'm going to try this with this player. I feel like it's the same scenario for a bunch of teams in this spot. So if you're Na'Vi, at least give us some bullshit like that. At least tell me what the plan is. Like at the moment, I know they tried to like buy more time by claiming they're going to go the Astralis route and have all the infrastructure and stuff. It's like, I don't really like, the problem with that is I'm going to have a video on this soon, but like Astralis themselves have oversold that part. Like, it's not like Astralis was just a good team and then all these like sports psychologists and dietitians made them fucking super amazing. Let's be real. They'd still be like 97% of what they are without all that. That just maybe adds like a bit of consistency, polishes stuff up, helps you out in some extra aspect. I could see it adding something, but like adding all that to Na'Vi isn't going to fix like problems that Edward has in the game. It isn't going to fix games where Flamey doesn't frag out. It isn't going to fix Zeus doing weird veto. Like, it's not going to fix any of those things.
See, I think of it the other way. I think the Na'Vi one changes makes complete sense to me, but the FaZe one is like a head scratcher for me. Because FaZe, you have players that just seem like they've been at the end of the road. I mean, you want to talk about Zeus underperforming for how long and Edward performing for how long? Well, I mean, the same thing's been going on in FaZe with their players, where you've had this level of underperformance. And unlike Edward and Zeus, you know, Guardian a little bit, but Olaf hasn't even really shown that he still has the ability to get to that peak. You know, it's not even like the one-off game where he gets 35 kills. At least, you know, for Edward, he had that he had a decent span of a couple weeks where he was putting up some numbers. He had that event where he was putting up some numbers. Sure. If you go back to the major, Zeus was really, really clutch. Zeus was not a liability at the major, which was crazy. And at least Na'Vi is making that run into the major, where if they don't get, you know, the miraculous upset by Ents, then they're in the final against Astralis. So for Na'Vi, you're looking around and you're saying, we have all these really stupid, like, personal issues. Maybe we're not happy with the level of dedication he's got. Maybe I don't like him as a person. But despite all this bullshit, we still just made it to the semifinals and we're like an overtime away from the grand finals. So for them, at least, it's like, well, if we give ourselves a chance to like step back and improve on all these other aspects of being a team, then we like, if we're making it to the major with issues, if we fix those issues, you know, maybe then we're going to be facing Astralis in way more finals and we'll be lifting a couple more trophies here and there. For FaZe, they look good in Miami, but outside of that, it was like even Nico.
Oh, it's cutting out now.
My back.
Yeah, say that again. It's not the internet. I think it's like the mic. I think you've got like the cut off or something. Like, you know, the thing where it just like, if it hits a certain point, you can't transmit anymore or something.
That's fucked up. Fucking
whatever.
Shit, Mike.
It's working now.
Yeah, no, but like even Nico, when they win Miami, he's
cut off again. Cut off exactly when he said the same thing.
Nico
had noise gate set.
Nico had. I don't know. I might.
Whatever. See if it'll work now.
But for Nico to say that he has no idea how they won, like, that's like a crazy thing where he's just like, how the fuck do we win that? He's like, I didn't think in the wildest imagination coming here that we would win this event. So I mean, you even in victory, some of these guys are a little bit confused how it's happening, you know?
This video was generously supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Butt Pounder 420, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my work? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.